Today we're going to be talking about arousal, stress, and anxiety. And today I have Monica Negron here to help us out. Monica, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Again, kind of like Ryan said, my name is Monica Negron. I currently work in athletics and student athlete development as the campus and community relations coordinator. Basically what I do is making sure student athletes have different opportunities to be able to go out in the community. A lot of other stuff that we do is student athlete education, whether if it's learning about domestic violence, financial literacy, getting freshman oriented, a lot of a large array of different things that we do. So it's definitely something that keeps us on his toes.
Okay, and you play lacrosse here, right?
Right, so I played lacrosse from 2010 to 2014. I was a four-year starter, a lot of postseason accolades, especially my senior year. We went from being like a very kind of subpar team to then my senior year winning Big East Championship, going to the first ever NCAA, going to the Sweet 16, having 4 All-Americans. We swept all Player of the Year accolades, me myself being Defender of the Year, our coach being Coach of the Year. We have attacker, midfielder, so if you're familiar with lacrosse terms, we were very good that year, so that was exciting.
Sweet. Let's get started. In general, would you describe yourself as a high arousal type of person, or someone who is mentally and physically activated, or a low arousal type of person, aka someone who is frequently very calm and comatose?
I think it really depends. Just in most things, you have just those different avenues where it calls to be more energetic, more kind of ready to attack. So when I was a student athlete, like when it came to practice, when it came to game day, like I was ready to go, I was focused, but I was also calm. Obviously, it did take times that when there were certain situations that when your heart is racing, that you may kind of develop a little bit that stress, but for the most part, I was always calm, yet also very energetic and just kind of a really aggressive player.
Do you think having anxiety before playing a sport is a good or a bad thing?
I mean, I think as some type of anxiety is good. Just being able to know that you just have to be ready to compete. So having that anxiety of all right, today's time, it's my time to kind of compete. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. Sometimes when people are too lax, that's kind of when they may oversee an opponent, and that's sometimes when you may see like a number 7 ranked team in the nation kind of overlooking a team that they're very nonchalant, very kind of go with the flow, and then you'll see them losing to an unranked team. So having that sense of anxiety is something that I think is required to be a good athlete.
Definitely, it kind of keeps you on your toes. Cognitive anxiety is the thought component of anxiety, and somatic anxiety is the degree of physical activation perceived, like having butterflies in your stomach, etc. Which one do you think is more difficult to deal with, cognitive anxiety or somatic?
I think it kind of varies. I know sometimes when people are just getting like too much into their head, then they're completely flat. Having butterflies is normal. I mean, especially if this is like your freshman year and this is your first kind of game, like you should have butterflies. I mean, I was someone that never really got really nervous during games, so there were certain situations I was like, yeah, like did have a little bit of butterflies, but I do know some people that were so anxious that in practice they were ready to go, probably sometimes the best player on the team, but then come game day, complete mental case and too many butterflies, and then dropping passes, missing shots point blank. So I've seen kind of both.
Trait anxiety is part of your personality, like being laid back or high strung, and state anxiety is a changing mood that depends on your trait anxiety. How would you describe your trait anxiety and give an example of how that has affected your state anxiety at some point during your sporting career?
Right, so I mean, normally I am pretty laid back. I consider myself slightly introverted, but to most people that actually I know, and I mean, I work in community relations, so public relations as well, so I usually have to be very outgoing, very kind of upbeat. Yeah. I guess sometimes it does affect that when I'm like up on this high for too long, that sometimes I kind of can crash. So kind of always being at that like upbeat, high energy, especially if you're trying to compete and needing to maintain that like upbeat and high energy. I definitely know that I've worked on really kind of like decreasing, like being a little bit more mellow. I'm usually not really rattled on most things. Being able to multitask on a lot of different disciplines, I've been able to just go with the flow. Not somewhat type A personality, but if something comes up, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to adjust and kind of ready to move on.
Okay. How much perceived control do you have? Like, in other words, how much did you believe that you had the resources and ability to meet those challenges that are put in front of you?
This is actually kind of really does bring me back to when I used to play. Sometimes people have those different reminders when they're playing, whether if it's they do something to their shoe or they write something like one word to be able to like remind them like, all right, each play in and out. My word was actually always control. I have it on my wrist. So before every single draw, I would look down at my wrist, I'm like, all right, like control is my word. So being able to know that I'm able to control like how fast I'm running, I'm able to control like my fouls, my checking. There's obviously a lot of things that are kind of out of my control, whether it's a bad call, whether like the weather, you can't really control that. You can't control what coach is going to say, what the other coaches are going to do, the game plan, but you're able to control like your own performance and then your own energy level. So as a captain, the biggest thing was being able, if I'm not having a good day, I can control how loud I am. I can control my ability to keep everyone else accountable, and then my level of play would get there too at some point.
Definitely. Cognitive state anxiety concerns the degree to which one worries or has negative thoughts, whereas somatic state anxiety concerns the moment-to-moment changes in perceived physiological activation. In terms of these, what technique have you used in your life to get rid of some anxiety before games?
Pre-game rituals, something that I used to always have, whether if it was making sure that I always looked the same. So girls always have game day hair. So during a season, hair pretty much was looking the exact same. Depending on the year, there was different game day hair. Same thing with like shoes and socks and listening to like the same playlist before every single game, getting taped at a certain way, not doing something out of the norm. That definitely helped being able to kind of keep me zoned in. Another thing is when different negative thoughts are happening, just kind of asking my teammates and just being self-aware. There's a lot of times, especially like young players, that if they miss a pass, if they miss a shot, miss a ground ball, starting to foul too much, that negativity is like kind of like really building up, and they're not at the point yet to be able to kind of be more self-aware, but like, hey, like let me pull myself out. Took me probably a year or two just talking to my coach and her saying like, hey, if you're feeling like you're playing flat right now and you just need like a minute break, just let me know, I'll pull you off and then get you settled, get you kind of reassessed, and then just put you on the game. So just being able to be more self-aware of how your mood is challenging but very using.
I agree. Self-report measures are ways you measure your arousal. For example, say my heart is pounding or I feel peppy. What are some examples of self-report measures that you have encountered in your career, and what emotions are usually coupled with them?
I guess some of the things that I feel would be like, sometimes my heart would be pounding, but in some of those situations, my heart would be pounding on like a bad call. Being a defender, like sometimes I would think a lot of these calls were very like subjective. So I think like that was a good play, not a foul. After being called a foul and like getting the ball taken away or something, my heart would be racing, and then emotionally I'd be like a little bit angry. I would kind of start laughing at one of those calls that during certain times, and then that you'll sometimes see like I probably went for a big swing right afterward just because like I was upset about the play, or if I do see sometimes if like I may have like turned the ball over, terrible pass, then kind of next reaction is try to get the ball back at all cost. Then there's like another foul that happens. Other things was kind of knowing when like you're in the zone. And just like knowing that like, all right, like I'm good, like I know this ball is mine, so just being confident and just having those one or two plays under my belt and being like, all right, I know from here on out that any ball that's coming my way off of a draw that I was going to get, and like knowing was going to kind of pretty much beat me to the ball. So then my confidence was definitely going up, giving me a nice healthy ego, but still able to compete and still centered.
Okay. Stress is defined as a substantial imbalance between demand and the response capability under conditions where a failure to meet that demand has important consequences. How do you deal with stress?
How do I deal with stress? It's taken a while to kind of be able to cope with different stressful situations. I guess as a student athlete, stress was kind of seen in different areas, whether as a captain, and then I had some of my teammates that were doing things that they weren't supposed to be doing, how to be able to stay focused and kind of be able to take the blame and kind of stay calm and then not get rattled. And like in a work environment, same thing. Like there are constant due dates going on, making sure that if you're having about 4 or 5 events going on at the same time, or 6 events are going on in a week, knowing that, yeah, it is a little bit stressful being able to kind of divvy out where people are supposed to go, but knowing to ask for help. A lot of times when people are very stressed out, they pretty much hone it on their own, and then they don't try to reach out. They don't really try to help out, reach for more help, which then kind of like really keeps putting them more in like the stress zone,
Yeah.
and then it's not helping them.
Yeah. Social physique anxiety is the degree to which people become anxious when others observe their physiques. Do you think this is more common with women or more common with men, and why?
I just think it could be both. I think there is an equal balance. A joke is like look good, feel good, play good.
Yeah.
So depending on like some people have a different game day swag or practice. So if you are not looking good, so this even is in terms of like how is your body looking, what are you wearing, all of that. If your fitness isn't there, then that's probably going to impact the way you feel and the way you look. So then kind of both of those like being hindered will then ultimately can affect your play. There's very few people that really don't care at all. So they're just like outside of the norm, but I do think the way you look, it does affect. Like guys, I do know that you either have to get a haircut before a game, or you have some people that have like a million wristbands, or just like having everything set in stone just so they have to have it every single game.
The drive theory is basically a theory that says as an individual arousal or state anxiety increases, so does their performance. Do you agree with this theory?
I think so. I really do think that kind of getting yourself up for those different events like will definitely be able to impact your performance. If you aren't really aroused, like kind of very low key, like very mellow, then I feel you're not really maximizing your talent and your abilities.
I agree. The inverted U hypothesis is very similar. Sports psychologists say that at low arousal levels, performance will be below par because you aren't psyched up enough. What do you think about this?
I think that's very true. Kind of again, like I said about having a ranked team playing an unranked team, sometimes that ranked team really won't really get up for those kind of games, and that's when the other team literally have nothing to lose, completely pumped, especially if they've prepared well too. That's when you see like those like Cinderella stories happen, and that's when you see like those ranked teams losing the game that they shouldn't have lost just because the team hasn't gotten up for that game like they should every other game, and that's just sports. So I definitely think that plays a lot of effect into things.
And then there's the individualized zones of optimal functioning, which says that top athletes have a zone of optimal state anxiety in which their best performance occurs. And anything outside that zone, poor performance occurs. Do you think you have a zone?
Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely know like being too amped up was never really good for me, but then I also had to have some level of like being calm. For someone that either kind of doesn't really matter what sport you play or kind of what position you play. If lacrosse is a sport, since that's what I'm familiar with, like defenders, if they're completely way too amped up, then they'll be like chasing an attacker and then the girl will be going like right to goal. Attackers, if you're too amped up and then you're cradling, you're trying to force things in, kind of like basketball, if you're like trying to think you do everything all at once and then trying to make every single play, dribbling in and out of people, then you're ultimately going to like turn the ball over when all you want to do is score, but you're not using all of your options.
Although multidimensional anxiety theory is just a theory, how credible do you think it is in terms of your experience?
I think that the one, like in the inverted U, is much more. I feel there's just more examples that will actually kind of make it more credible, and there's just more examples to it. I think that yes, if someone is worrying, and then if someone is focusing just on that, they're not going to do well. But for every single person, there's different. A level of worry in certain people might actually kind of motivate them to maybe hustle a bit harder on a play or make sure they get back on defense. But I don't necessarily believe that all worrying is wrong or all worrying is negative. I think there is kind of like another area where it can actually benefit you, but I think it's very minute.
I agree. Can you think of an example of a normal inverted U with low worry and an inverted U with high worry that leads to catastrophe? And how do you think that an athlete feels during a catastrophe?
Right, so my kind of example of just like someone that beginning of the game, very amped up, could be a maybe rivalry game. So there's that kind of level of just like excitement and arousal, and then just kind of maintaining that throughout the game. So your bench is like cheering you on and you're making like these top plays. But say during a game that maybe the game is on the line, or things haven't been going the right way, so you're still kind of at that level of just being like amped up, but you start worrying about, all right, maybe I'm going to turn the ball over in the next one, because one turnover may have happened, but then having that lingering thought of, okay, so I'm going to turn the ball over, and then you constantly keep saying that to yourself, then a little bit like self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're going to constantly say you're going to do something, or you are not going to do something, or you're not playing well, then that negative piece is going to ultimately lead to you playing not the way you should be playing, and you kind of having that catastrophic event of really having a mess up play, and they're just being like your performance was kind of at a peak and it was at a good state, a good point, but then as your worrying is getting high and you're turning the ball even more, and so then once you kind of hit that like third or fourth turnover in like a very 5-minute play, then that's kind of where this catastrophe happens, and then your confidence is going to be just like stricken. Coach is probably yelling at you, and there's your whole thing kind of goes flat.
And then there's the reversal theory, which contends that the way in which arousal affects performance depends basically on an individual's interpretation of their arousal level. How do you interpret your arousal level?
I think that, I don't know, it kind of really does depend on kind of what I'm doing. Now, really not as an athlete, it changes kind of day in and day out as to what I'm doing. It's very situational. I try to stay at that kind of upbeat, very kind of energetic and ready to go. But same thing, I do have those moments where like the stress may be kind of going a little bit higher, and then that's when my performance may be kind of been decreasing, when things aren't going, as in most things, when things aren't going the way they should.
Facilitative and debilitative anxiety depends on how much control the athlete perceives. When you played lacrosse, did you feel like you had control or not? In other words, did you believe you could cope with the anxiety and believe in your abilities, or did you have trouble with this?
It took me a while, for sure. Watching a lot of video was something that helped, being able to think that I was prepared and I was in control. One of my biggest things as a player was I was a matchup defender. So I always knew I had the other team's best player. So kind of being prepared and then knowing what are her tendencies, what does she like to do, is she going to like pass the ball out, is she really going to take a hard challenge, kind of making sure that I was prepared kind of made me more so I was in control. So for us, you would sometimes play 2 games in a weekend. So when I played, we were in the Big East. So you had probably two full days to prepare for a team. So you saw film, you did a scout, then the next day was all on the team. But if you're playing 2 big teams, for us, we'd have like a Loyola and a Georgetown weekend. So you had almost a week to prepare for one team, and then you would just have 1 day to prepare for another team. During those times, it would be kind of challenging for us. One, legs-wise, like we're tired. We just played a full game the night before. We're having to prep for a team the day before. So when people come in the tournament time and that stuff, it just takes another level of focus just to be able to take all of that information in and then just know the game plan no matter what it is and just being able to execute. So probably it did take me definitely first year kind of getting acclimated with that. And then I know by my senior year, it was because I was a senior, I knew I wasn't going to get outplayed by girls that were younger than me. So then just kind of knowing what I can do and what I was good at, which did take time to be like, all right, so what are my 3 to 5 different things that I know that I excel at, I know that I'm really good at, and then I should bring every single day. Once I knew that, I knew coach was expecting me to do X, Y, Z, and then if I may have randomly scored in a game, that's like an added bonus that wasn't expected, but just kind of working on that too.
Okay, and then perception of control is critical in determining whether state anxiety will be viewed as facilitative or debilitative. What do you think?
I think it's obviously more like facilitative. Perception of control is also kind of your ability to see if you're going to achieve certain goals. So knowing that if I'm looking at seeing my 6 goals that I had every day in and day out, which I did that last year, being able to know that I can achieve each one, and then once I got to each goal, like a fitness goal or something like that, whether if it's what my body comp was, what my mile was going to be, I knew that once I kind of put those markers, kind of goal seeking instead of goal setting, I was kind of able to get to where I was just because I had something to work on once I got to it, and then I started looking at something else.
Sweet, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you, Monica. Is there anything else you'd like to say to my classmates before this interview?
It was a pleasure to be interviewed today, and go Cards.
Go Cards. All right, thank you.